Bethulsa! Wake up! Bethulsa! Bethulsa! Wake up! Bethulsa! Hey! Wake up, I'm not joking. There we are. Good evening, sleepyhead. Were you up too late working with the dead again? I see. Well, it's time to tell one of your stories. Pick a good one. Ah, that is a good one. Well, our story starts, as most do, in events of great trauma and change. It takes place in the world of chaos, which was no stranger to world-changing events and incredible dramas spanning hundreds of years. Well, that won't do. Whoever wrote this book got it wrong. Sometimes things go on for thousands upon thousands of years, spanning multiple realities. But you know that well, don't you? Anyway, there was the time a Fey Ranger Rashik faced off against the devil in his own church to save a woman. Or the time a boy named Raphael, who had been surviving in hell, met someone special who had helped him escape. Or the time when two who were friends clashed. Funny, this is another one of you, but I don't remember him. Well then, let's focus on the story at hand. Now, our story focuses on the town of Small, named for being rather, well, small. There lived a young boy, Bartleby, and his mother, Savannah, who grew up in a home not too different from yours or mine, except that it was plagued by poverty. The father, Edmund, was never at home due to his work, but the mother and her son did their very best to keep things tidy and in order. The boy loved to play all the time, dancing, singing, and telling creative stories as best he could. He learned all of this from his mother, of course, who was also gifted with many talents. Savannah stayed at home with Bartleby and loved and cared for him deeply. She was his teacher, his guide through the storms of life, and also his friend. She taught him the little things like cooking, cleaning when there was time, and feeding the chickens, and also the big things like to laugh and have fun. The father toiled away his days in a deep, suffocating mine, chipping away at stone to make the rich lords of the land even richer, while he broke his back. There in the dark, he would often dream of a better life, or at the very least, a mug of strong ale at the end of the day. The father would return home to eat dinner, but then head out to gamble away most of the coin he had earned in a fruitless attempt to better their lives. The mother became really good at entertaining the boy, and making water and potatoes last as long as she could, until it was time to harvest one of their chickens. Bartleby would always name them, despite being warned not to, and every time it came to eat Tommy, or Bobby, or any one of his friends, he would cry. His mother would hold him each time, rock him in her lap, and sing him a soft, kind lullaby. Our friends are with us as long as they can be, and we relish each moment we can. Their snuggles, their playing, and all of their ways fill our hearts to the brim. When the time comes, they give us their lives, and in turn, we give them our hearts. They live with us forever as they move on up to heaven. Little feathery friends till the end. When the boy was 10, his mother became terribly ill. She would lie in bed and was no longer able to sing or dance or play, so the boy took it upon himself to entertain her. Each night he would put on a show for her, doing his best to dance, sing, and tell her whatever jokes he could think of. "Here's one," he would shout out excitedly. "What's round and small and goes mew mew mew?" "What?" she would ask, smiling at him. "A kitten," he would exclaim, and she would find the energy to laugh, though most of his jokes were mere observations and not really funny at all. But to her, he was a comedian and going to make the world laugh. She would laugh until she coughed, spitting up little flecks of red onto the white pillowcase and sheets. Bartleby's love for his mother was deep and pushed him to a place of anger he had no way of understanding. The one he would go to for help was in no condition to give him any understanding, and despite his young age, a deep rage was building. Scared, Angry and feeling the dreaded weight of being alone, the boy confronted his drunk father early one morning. "Why don't you buy her some medicine?" he demanded. "I have no coin left," the father admitted, feeling ashamed. "Why don't we get her to the church? They have healers there," he screamed. "I'm not allowed there. I've shamed our family name," the father said, before belching out a vile-smelling gust of air from his putrid gut. "I'll do it myself," he affirmed, and then left their home and headed into town. There he was greeted by a stalwart young lad about his age who was helping to build a schoolhouse for the smaller children by carrying piles of lumber where they needed to go. "Excuse me, where is the church?" Bartleby asked, his appearance gaining a kind, worried look from the other boy. "I'm Tor, the good, with 2 R's, huzzah, and the church is all around you." The boy beamed, smiling at him. "How can we help?" Bartleby croaked, feeling something inside he hadn't yet been made aware of. The bright blue eyes combined with perfect white teeth of Tor made him jealous, but he couldn't admit that. So it began to churn in the back of his mind. "My mum's sick," he said, and felt tears trying to force themselves out of his eyes. He never allowed this, so he swallowed hard and called himself stupid and weak inside his mind. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is she too ill to come here?" Tor asked, giving him a look of worry and love. "Yeah, we don't have any coin," Bartleby admitted, and felt a knife of rage in his side. He closed his eyes and pictured his father on the ground in front of him as he choked the life out of him. "Yeah, one sec," Tor said and quickly darted away. Inside Bartleby were the usual negative emotions of worry and despair, but combined with something new he didn't like at all. This other child had been given such luxury, clearly, and for some reason he couldn't quite see, was better than Bartleby. But why? Why was that? Why was that fair? He screamed inside his head, while both that and his heart hurt. Tor returned with a priest who carried an alchemical bag, and the 3 of them returned to his home. Lying on the bed, his mother had passed, blood spilling out from her red lips, which contrasted the paleness of her face. Bartleby collapsed by her, and this time he couldn't stop the tears from escaping. The priest looked her over just to be certain, and when he and Bartleby's eyes met, the look inside crushed his soul. "It's all my fault. It's 'cause I left. I wasn't here to make her laugh," he said in between sobs. "No, son, it's not your fault. She was already gone," the priest said, and put his arm around the hysterical boy. "It's my father's fault. He spent all our coin and refused to get her any help. No, it's whoever pays him. It's their fault. They should have paid him more. Then we wouldn't be so poor," he sobbed, while clutching his small hands into angry fists. It was all the priest could do to hold him and allow him to let all his anger out. Tor watched on, wanting to do something to help, but feeling powerless. The priest said a prayer to the goddess Hetty for him and his pain, praying that he be guided on his path to a better tomorrow. Both children were defined in that moment, deciding on 2 very different paths of strength. Bartleby began to study every dark art and alchemy text he could, vowing he would bring his mother back from the dead. Tor would work out every day and read his religious texts, going on to then give as much love to others as he could. 3 years later, Tor finally got Bartleby to come with him to a festival the town was holding. It had been a rather harsh winter, so when spring hit, everyone was ready to dance, drink and be merry. Even Bartleby's father was there, pouring down mug after mug of wine into his mouth. All the while Bartleby glared at him with daggers. "Come on, just let it go and have a good time," Tor said, pulling Bartleby out of his hatred. "Tell me a joke." "You want a joke, huh?" Bartleby asked, his eyes flashing for a second. Then he shook his head and smiled. "Okay. What's tall, dull, and goes eh, eh, eh?" Tor thought on it for a moment, then smirked. "What?" "My dad having a stroke!" Bartleby exclaimed and slapped his thigh and began to cackle, laughing so hard he wore his throat out, causing his voice to become hoarse. "Yeah, I can see how you think that's funny, but you got any jokes not about your dad?" Tor asked, bringing him back to reality. "Oh, okay, sure, let me see," he said and cleared his throat. "Okay. So 3 working men are on a job together, where they have to go into the woods. Their names are Todd, the leader, Stephen, the slacker, and Sven, the second in command. Each one is assigned a different task. One has to bring in a bundle of branches, the other must collect pine cones, and the third must trap and kill something for supper. The first gets to work, collecting as many branches as he can, while the second one takes a nap. The third comes up with an idea to not only feed them for a night, but to feed the entire town for a week. He finds some sap from a tree and spreads it on the sleeping man's face and arms. "Where's this going?" Tor asked, looking worried. "Just be patient." So, the second man wakes up and is covered in sap, unable to move, so he calls for help. The third man was trying to lure a bear over to him, which he would then hunt and kill, to feed the town. But the bear never showed up. Eventually, he and the first man got back to work, when don't you know it, the bear finally shows up. It chases them into a cave where they stumble upon an old, rotting carcass of a deer. The deer had clearly been injured elsewhere and then dragged there. It had been fed upon by the bear and insects drawn to the rot. It was a grim reminder to them that everything and everybody dies, so they needed to be safe. Life is not a guarantee, it's a privilege, and one slip up and bam, it's all over. The bear, hungry, lunges at them, but they're trapped. The first man shouts to the third, "Do something!" The third man, thinking quickly, rips off his shirt and uses it to make himself appear larger, hoping to scare the bear away. But the bear doesn't flinch. Instead, it just tilts its head, pauses, and then starts sniffing the air. Turns around and makes its way back to the second man, sniffing the sap, it seems, oddly interested. The bear licks the sap off his face and arms, and just like that, the second man's limbs suddenly become free. The bear backs away, satisfied, and waddles off into the woods, leaving the 3 men stunned. The first man, still panting, looks at the third and says, "What the hell just happened?" The third man wipes his brow, grinning darkly. "Well, I guess we found out how to get out of a sticky situation, am I right?" Tor blinks, uncertain if he should laugh or just sit there, waiting for the punchline to sink in. "No? You're a tough audience," Bartleby said, and went back to glaring at his father. Later that evening, Tor introduced Bartleby to a friend of his, a young girl named Rose who was an artist. Knowing that Bartleby was also creative, the two hit it off, and the evening was everything Tor could have hoped for, with Bartleby finally smiling. During the festivities, Bartleby's father was there, drinking away the evening. Bartleby's attention was taken off of him upon meeting Rose. Later, he stumbled off and was confronted by 2 men looking for payment on a debt he owed. He slurred his words, promising coin by the end of the week, but they were not hearing it. The next morning, Bartleby sprang from bed, happier than he'd ever been, going out to feed the chickens and get things ready for the day. After he cooked himself breakfast, he noticed an odd silence to the air. His father wasn't snoring either, in his bed, the armchair, or out front in the bushes. In fact, he was nowhere to be seen. Joy rushed through him and he ran into town, wanting to take advantage of a day without his father as much as he could. He invited Rose to lunch. She accepted, and they ate and talked and lost time in each other's eyes. Passion exploded as they connected more and more, and before they knew it, their lips were locked. The fire grew into a flame and the two spent the night together, lost in each other's glow. Bartleby hadn't known such warmth since his mother, and Rose had never met someone who excited her like he did. Hours turned to days and days turned to weeks and weeks to months. There was love in the air, and Bartleby never even thought of his father again. Instead, he moved Rose in and started planning on how he'd make his fortune, writing a play to put on for the town, one of love, laughter, and adventure. He was going to call it Fortune Amidst Catastrophe, and he wrote the biggest part for Rose. Then, as if a sick joke was playing out, one evening as they rehearsed, she coughed up a little blood. His ears recognized the sound of lungs pushing out fluid, and panic gripped his heart. This time, he thought, I'll heal her before it ever gets bad enough. With all he'd learned over the years, there was no way it would take her. So, he got to work, losing himself in his studies and experiments. All the while she got paler and paler, all the while watching him work and missing the days when they'd just laughed together. During his work one evening, something amazing, but also dark, got in and tugged at his mind. He realised that he could make her cells stay alive, despite the damage that was happening to them. So he put together a potion that did just that, but he could tell it was just staving off the inevitable, unless he figured out a more permanent cure. When she still had the strength, she would try to clean and he would lovingly help her, doing most of it himself to ease her burden. At dinner one night, she asked him, "Why don't you take me to the church? They have healers there." "Because they can't do anything," he would lie, feeling that he was on the cusp of finding a cure. "They could at least help. You could share your studies with them," she would bring up, looking at him with love and trust, but also some concern. "You're right. I'll go see them tomorrow, I promise," he said, and then kissed her forehead. The next day he went to the church, taking with him his research and books. Inside he sat down with the priest, who listened to all he had to say, but frowned upon reading his notes. "These? Where did you come up with these ideas? They go against our core principles here and could hurt the girl," the priest brought up with concern, giving him a worried look. "I'm keeping her alive, which is more than you could do," he grumbled and crossed his arms. "You should let me take a look at her. I can't tell just from these how she's doing. We have something that may at least help her rest more comfortably, as we still don't have a cure yet either. However, the light of Hetty is miraculous, which may be enough on its own," he said, and went to stand. "Sure, you can take a look," he begrudgingly agreed, and they went back to his home. There, the priest looked her over and gave her some medicine, frowning at her complexion. After he was done, he and Bartleby stepped outside to talk. "I'm afraid it's already in the late stages, so our medicine will really only dull the pain. I recommend you pray at least 3 times a day and get her to join you, if she's able. Give her this medicine every 6 hours for the pain as well," he said, a look of sympathy and worry on his face. "Thanks," Bartleby groaned as he walked away. "For nothing," he barked under his breath, and then returned to her. "Am I going to get better?" Rose asked, looking up into his eyes. "They gave me something for you for the pain, but that's all they could do. Mark my words, you will get better, if it's the last thing I do," he said, and then returned to his desk. Tor came around and offered his help, but deep down inside, Bartleby had to be the one to heal her. He had to prove that his abilities were just as powerful, nay, even more powerful than that of the church, so he rejected the help, lying that she was getting better. Well, she slowly slipped away, and as he worked, passing in the night, the next morning he found her, and it crushed him. He'd never admit his part in it, or that his pride killed his love. You know a thing or two about pride, don't you? Such a foolish thing a Bethulsa can do. Sorry about that. The lot of you just drives me crazy. Back to the story. When he finally discovered her body, a part of him died, and just at that moment, something else took its place. This uninvited guest led him down a path of dark exploration to the question, what if I can bring her back? Which then led to the obsession and no sleep, little food, and a sort of mental decay. His physical features began to change, aging rapidly with his hair going grey. Eventually, he slipped away into the night, finding his way to an old, derelict cabin 2 hours away in the woods. Inside, amidst a pile of bones, was a flesh-bound book with a face on it. It read, "The Book of Bethulsa. You didn't find this book, it found you." Something sinister happened the more he read the book. It was full of journal entries, spells, drawings, and madness. Yet, the more he read, the more he knew it was his book, meant for him. Not that he found it, that he was the one who wrote it. That was when he knew who he was, knew his real name, Bethulsa, and how he was going to bring not just Rose back, but also that of his dead mother. Toiling in this magic brought only misery to him and pushed all but Tor away from his life, who continued to offer his help, asking that he destroy that awful book and come back to the church with him and to be healed and forgiven for whatever he's done. Despite being pushed away, Tor would convince the local authorities to let him bring Bartleby in for questioning on Rose's disappearance and the exhuming of Bartleby's mother's corpse. His appearance had changed and he was sickly looking and covered in fleas and other parasites. Tor begged him to let him help, to take him to the church, to clean him up, and he could ask for forgiveness. But Bethulsa fled instead, feeling a deep shame that pretended to be righteous anger. So he cast an experimental spell, one that was unlike any he'd practiced before. It opened a doorway to somewhere he couldn't have possibly imagined. However, it was an unstable spell, and the doorway flickered in and out, appearing much like TV static and black and white fire, making even he afraid to go through. So he pushed past the fear and threw himself in, because even death would be better than the life he left behind. Tor would hold a funeral for his dear friend, assuming the worst when he never came back from wherever he wound up. They found and buried Rose, as well as putting Bartleby's mother back in her grave. Tor would spend 30 minutes a day praying for Bartleby's soul, that he find his way to the light so he could join those he loved again. As for Bartleby, Bethulsa, well, he continued to change and eventually got back into creating. And as for that, well, that's a whole other story.
Jesus! Not you again! I am here, my son. Nope, we're not doing that! Cut it!